Hey there everyone. Welcome back to Wise Learn. If you're tuning in for the first time, I'm Emma.
And I'm Ethan. Thanks for joining us today. In this episode, we're going to talk about something that's probably crossed your mind if you're learning English or any language: how to speak English in public without fear.
Oh yes. Public speaking can be a major challenge, especially if you're speaking in a second language. Whether you're presenting in a meeting, talking to a group, or just chatting with someone in English, the fear of making mistakes can hold us back.
Exactly. And we know many of you have asked how to conquer that fear, so today we're going to break it all down: how to stop worrying about making mistakes, how to build your confidence, and even how to enjoy speaking in English in front of others.
It's going to be a fun one, so stay with us.
All right, let's dive into it. We've all been there, right? You're about to speak in front of people, and suddenly your palms get sweaty, your heart starts racing, and you just think, what if I mess up?
Yeah, the classic fear of messing up. It's like your brain goes into overdrive thinking about the worst-case scenario. But let's talk about why this fear exists in the first place. Then why do you think speaking English in public is so terrifying for so many people?
Great question, Emma. I think one of the main reasons is the fear of judgment. When you're speaking in a second language, there's always that pressure to sound perfect, and that's because we tend to judge ourselves more harshly. It's like we're not just speaking English, we're trying to prove our worth through our language skills.
Yeah, I totally agree. You feel like every word you say is being scrutinized, especially if you're in a formal setting like a work meeting or a class presentation. It's like the fear of making mistakes transforms into a fear of being judged by others.
And let's not forget the pressure of sounding like a native speaker. So many people think that if they don't speak perfectly with a native accent, others won't take them seriously. But here's the thing, even native speakers make mistakes. They trip over words, mispronounce things, and nobody cares. So, why should we hold ourselves to an impossible standard?
Exactly. It's all about understanding that communication is the goal, not perfection. When you start to focus on the message you're sharing rather than obsessing over the little details, it takes the pressure off.
Right? And another thing is that fear often comes from lack of preparation. If you haven't practiced, or if you're uncertain about the topic you're speaking about, your fear intensifies. But with more practice, you'll realize that your fears are often much bigger in your head than they are in reality.
So we know the fear is real, but now let's talk about how to shift our mindset. I think a huge part of overcoming fear is changing how we think about public speaking. Then what are your thoughts on shifting from fear to confidence?
I think the first thing you have to do is accept the possibility of making mistakes. It's part of being human. And let's be real here, every time you make a mistake, it's actually an opportunity to learn. Think of mistakes like little stepping stones toward improvement.
That's such a good point. And when you give yourself permission to make mistakes, you instantly release some of that anxiety. So instead of thinking, oh no, I'm going to mess up, think, okay, if I mess up, it's totally fine. I'll just correct myself and keep going.
Exactly. Also, I think one of the most important mindset shifts is to focus on the message rather than the language itself. When you focus on what you want to communicate instead of how you're going to say it, you'll find that your fear decreases.
That's so true. I remember when I first started speaking English in public, I was always worried about sounding perfect. But after a while, I realized the audience cares more about what I'm saying than how perfectly I'm saying it. Once I made that shift, speaking became so much easier.
Yeah, and another mindset shift is understanding that confidence is a skill, and like any skill, it takes time to develop. It's not something you're born with. It's something you build up over time, through practice and experience.
All right, we've talked about the fear and mindset shifts, but now let's get into some practical tips. What are some things our listeners can do right now to overcome their fear of speaking in English?
I love this part. The first tip I always recommend is practice in low-pressure environments. Start by speaking English with a friend, family member, or even in front of the mirror. The key is to build confidence gradually. If you can talk comfortably with a small group, you'll feel more prepared when it's time to speak in front of a larger audience.
Oh yes, I always say that. It's like warming up before a big game. You don't just jump straight into a marathon. You start with shorter runs, right? Practice in informal settings and work your way up.
Exactly. And another tip I have is to visualize success before you speak. Imagine yourself speaking confidently, smiling, and the audience reacting positively. It's like a mental rehearsal, and it works wonders. Visualizing success helps reduce anxiety and sets you up for a better performance.
I do that too. It's kind of like tricking your brain into thinking you've already succeeded. Super powerful.
Another good tip is to take deep breaths before speaking. It sounds simple, but it's amazing how much it calms you down. When you take a few deep breaths, it slows your heart rate, clears your mind, and helps you focus.
That's great advice. And let's not forget about smiling. Smiling not only helps you look more approachable, but it also makes you feel more relaxed. When you smile, you trigger a positive response in both you and the audience.
It's contagious, right? Smiling is a great way to lower your anxiety and make the whole situation feel less tense. And speaking of tension, if you're feeling nervous, try to slow down. Rushed speech often comes from nervousness. When you speak slowly, you'll not only sound more confident, but you'll also give yourself time to think about what to say next.
I love all of these tips, Ethan. But let's talk about how to build long-term confidence. Because overcoming fear isn't a one-time thing. It's a journey. How do we make this a part of our routine?
That's such a good point, Emma. It's about consistency. One thing I did when I was learning to speak publicly was to set small, achievable goals. For example, I'd aim to speak for just 2 minutes in front of a small group and then gradually increase that time. By setting small goals, I built my confidence step by step.
I love that. It's all about building momentum. And something else that helped me was recording myself speaking in English. I would listen to the recordings and identify areas where I could improve. Over time, I could hear my own progress, and that was a huge confidence boost.
Oh, I did that too. And it's amazing how much progress you can notice. You start to hear yourself getting smoother and more confident. You'll also realize that what you thought was a mistake wasn't a big deal at all. It's just part of the process.
Exactly. And I think it's important to also seek feedback from people you trust. Ask a friend or mentor to listen to your speaking and give you constructive criticism. Not only does that help you improve, but it also makes you feel more comfortable because you know you're growing.
All right, as we wrap up, I want to remind everyone that speaking English in public is a skill you can absolutely develop. It takes time, effort, and a little bit of bravery, but you can do it.
Yeah, fear doesn't go away overnight, but it gets easier with each step you take. So be patient with yourself. Start small, practice often, and keep pushing through that fear.
And remember, every time you speak in public, you're becoming a more confident communicator. You've got this.
Thanks so much for joining us today on Wise Learn. We hope you feel inspired and ready to tackle public speaking in English with a fresh perspective.
Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for more tips and tricks on learning and growing. We'll catch you next time.